Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review. And you will notice that I'm looking a little bit casual today because I'm actually in full preparation mode for a competition that is in 3-4 days time, and it's a very big space that I have to construct my design. It's 2 meters by 2 meters, 2.5 meters tall. It's actually split into 2 designs, a before and after type thing, and it'll be on display for 5 days. So I'm very much in planning and preparation mode, but I thought it was important to get this video out to you to keep our weekly schedule running. So this week we're looking at a design with the title Cascading Beauty. This was a modern cascade, often described in definitions as a waterfall. And so what it needs to look like is that the plant material is coming up and then cascading down. So somewhat different to a traditional cascade, which you would see more in a bridal bouquet. So that very triangular, very formal shape that trails down to a point is often referred to as the cascading bouquet. This one is a modern cascade. So what I've used here is for the stand to give me the height that I needed on this plinth. So the plinth is 60 centimetres in square, but we've got a metre of space to use all around. And so I could come down the front or the sides of the plinth, because it was judged from the front and the sides as well, which is why you can see the 3 images, so you get an idea of what it looked like either side as well as from the front. And that metre is measured from the top of the tallest piece of plant material down to where it finishes over the front. I didn't go down the sides so much. So I kept within that space, but it gives you a little bit more leeway to make it a real particularly for a cascading design, a real cascade. So as I started to say, I've got a piece of bark at the back. This is an upright piece of bark that I've used in many other of these reviewed designs, and so you can see that used in all sorts of other ways. I put a metal stand inside it so that I could have some water source at the top for the plant material that's going to be cascading down. It also gives me a nice, strong, solid support for the weight of what was going on the design. Now I've based the design, that the cascade part of it, the top part of it, is the inflorescence from a palm tree, and that comes in such nice twisted forms that I felt that it was a great way to start off the cascade, start off that waterfall effect. And lower down in the design, I've used the individual pieces from that inflorescence, so the twigs basically, and to ptarmigan those down so that it follows through in that same, using that same plant material. The rest of the placements are in the water source at the top of the stand, and it's some Australian native woolly bush, some chrysanthemums, carnations, some westringia, which again is an Australian native, and some looks like gardenia leaves or comedians. I think it's probably gardenia leaves. What I was looking for when I was looking for those placements is plant material that naturally droops, naturally cascades down, so that it helps me with that effect rather than have to try and place everything or train everything. Now there is also threaded through the whole of the design some shredded flax that I have wrapped in red decorative wire, and that allows me to manipulate it and loop it around. It carries through the red colour, so there's only those sort of 3 colours in the palette, which means that the flowers stand out, but they're kind of reflected in the green that's around it because of those snake-like formations that I've made with the shredded flax and the wire. The design placed second in the competition, and I was very, very pleased because this is a tough competition. The judges are very tough, I'll say, and it's the first time in probably 10 years. I did this in 2019, so it would have been close to 10 years that I've been competing in these competitions run by this particular group, and it was the first time that I had individually on this occasion, which is a big show outdoors, as you can see, where I had won a prize. I had previously in other competitions where they run it in conjunction with someone else. I've won prizes there, but never when it was individually their competition. And at this competition, I got a first and 2 seconds, and so I was very, very happy with my results. This one, as I said, placed second. The one that placed first was a much fuller design and fully and openly cascading down. You couldn't actually see the stand that it was on. It just looked like it was a fountain that had just come out and come down. And so it was well deserving of its first place, but I was delighted with second place. There were very limited amount of feedback from the judges, just basically that the colour didn't run all the way down through, and I can see that that's the case. And it was a little bit bare on the sides in terms of judging from the side. There was just too much of the negative space there. So I'm interested to see what DesignEye has got to tell me and what things I could do to lift the design into a higher category next time around. So let's see what we've got in our analysis this week. Overall impression, first of all, this design presents a strong and confident interpretation of a cascading form, combining structural framework with generous floral material. It successfully creates movement and visual interest, particularly when viewed from multiple angles, and demonstrates a clear intent to explore downward flow supported by an overhead construction. So it's meeting that waterfall, in inverted commas, criteria well. So as a first impression, yes, it meets the criteria for the judging. Does it fully talk about beauty? Certainly it's cascading, but if we look at the title as Cascading Beauty, there's beauty at the top, but as the judge said, it doesn't go all the way down. There isn't that continuous feel of cascading beauty. There's a little bit too much space in some of the areas. So let us go on to the principles and elements of design individually and see how I have met each of those criteria. The balance, first of all, balance is achieved through an asymmetrical approach with the visual weight concentrated in the central floral mass and extended downward through cascading elements. The upper twig structure provides counterbalance to the heavier floral grouping below. From the side view, however, the design appears slightly forward, suggesting a minor imbalance in depth distribution. And that's very true. If you look at that second image, and I chose that side view as the second image so that you could see quite clearly how the placement of the floral material looks great from the front, but from the side, which is one of the sides it was judged from, it does look like it's pushing out more than it is cascading down. And so I needed to keep an eye on that when I was putting the design together. And had I had that extra material to put down the sides, it would have masked that feeling somewhat. It would still have come out that far, but I would have had other material that was reflecting that as well, or shadowing it so that it wasn't quite so obvious. So a good observation. Proportion. There's a good relationship between container, structure and floral material. The scale of the cascade is appropriate to the height of the structure. Some of the longer trailing elements extend well, but a few feel disconnected rather than integrated into the overall proportions. So I think that where I have got the tatami section coming down, it's come down a lot further than some of the floral material, and I needed to bring some elements of that floral material once again at the sides and bring it down to that same sort of level. And the depth, if I'd done it at the sides, then I would have got the better balance in the depth. Scale. The design reads well in a show context. Materials are appropriately sized for visibility. The bold blooms help anchor the design visually. So the red colour is making the design stand on its own merits. Had I used any of the softer colours, it probably wouldn't look as good. And I run the risk, and I think I was thinking about that a little bit before when we were talking about proportion, is that it starts to feel like it's a bit of a hybrid between traditional cascade and this modern waterfall, in that I've almost made a triangle of the floral placements, the red flower placements, and I needed to spread that out a bit more, or have more of the drooping greenery, so that it was a more even cascade all the way around. Rhythm. Rhythm is one of the stronger aspects. Repetition of colour and form leads the eye downward effectively. The woven and trailing materials reinforce directional flow. Some interruptions occur when foliage becomes dense, slightly breaking the visual pathway. And so that's, I guess that's the, when I look at it now, the camellia leaves, the gardenia leaves, whichever one it was, they're wrong for this design. They're too solid a form for this design, and it does break the rhythm because wherever I've placed them, they stand out as a separate entity. They don't really fit into the flowing, airy look that I've managed to create with the rest of the placements and the rest of the choices of the plant material. Dominance. A clear focal area exists in the rich cluster of deep pink-red blooms. Strong colour contrast against green foliage enhances the dominance. The focal point could be refined by reducing competing elements immediately around it. So I think that had I been a bit more careful about the downward flow of the placements, it gets there but not quite. And I needed to bring that colour all the way down, and I think that would help the movement and the dominance because you wouldn't be as distracted by the things that are around it. So again, something to think about. There's not a lot of negative space in that front view, and there's too much in the side view. So just need to think about those juxtapositions a little bit better. Contrast. There is effective contrast in texture, woody structure and soft florals and trailing grasses, form, structured framework and loose cascade, and colour, vibrant pinks against the greens. So good contrast in a few areas of the principles and elements of design always strengthens a design in terms of its judging, because if you've just got a contrast in colours and someone else's design has got a contrast in colour and a texture, then they are perceived as meeting the design principles better than your design, and so they're going to get ahead of you in the rankings. Harmony. Harmony is generally well resolved. Natural materials unify the design. The framework and cascade relate conceptually, though slightly more integration between top structure and downward flow would strengthen cohesion. So I think part of that is the top of the inflorescence is out there on its own. It's got none of the plant, none of the greenery through it, or not enough through it, and so it sort of stands out on its own. And I know when I did it, I thought, well, that'll be okay because I've reflected that in the tatami at the base, but because it's a different form, it's not quite as harmonious as it could be. So I needed to perhaps bring some of that twisted inflorescence down into before it led into the tatami, because you can't really work out what the transition is. How did it go from this form to the very structured form at the bottom? So I take that on board. Got to do something about that. Line. Strong cascading line is evident and readable. Vertical and diagonal lines from the framework add interest. Some lines compete rather than support the main directional flow, and again, that's something to do with that inflorescence at the top and then the very structured tatami and horizontal lines at the base. And so I just need to think a little bit more about those placements and perhaps twisting that tatami around, having it smaller, having 2 or 3 of them at different lengths and twisting them slightly would have a simple thing like that would have helped it in terms of not having competing lines in the design. Form. The intended cascading form is clear. Top structure introduces a semi-abstract form which adds character. Greater clarity of silhouette would improve the impact. So the silhouette they're talking about there is the side view it's just a bit, it's almost in 3 parts. It's the base of the inflorescence that curves back over the top of the design. It's the upright of the bark, and then it's the front part of the design. And so I've got nothing that brings that together to form a single silhouette. It's 3 silhouettes as it stands now. So I do need to look at that. And that's an issue with items that are judged from the side is that you always need to think about, what is this view telling me? Is it still telling me about the class title, or is it telling me a different story altogether, or telling me nothing at all? Colour. Rich harmonious palette of pinks and reds, limited colour variation works well for unity. Slight tonal variation could enhance depth. And that, again, when I looked at it this time around, I thought I really didn't vary the red colour very much at all. Everything is the same sort of red. The chrysanthemum's got a little bit of lighter white touches to the edges of the petals, but not enough that it helps with the design. And there isn't white anywhere else in the design, so that wouldn't really have counted for much anyway. So I think that even though the red against the green works well, it does need just a slight variation, as it says, in the tones to create a bit more interest, and it creates depth in your design as well. Texture. Excellent textural contrast through woody, woven, soft petals and trailing elements. This is a highlight of the design. So this was in my texture is the hero phase of my designing, and there is a lot of textural contrast in it. There's not a lot that's shiny, which is interesting. It hasn't picked up the leaves. I think I probably thought the leaves were going to be a bit shiny, but it doesn't really need it because it's got those other textural contrasts through the design that make it interesting to look at. Space. Space is somewhat restricted within the central mass. The cascade benefits from openness, but the upper section could use more breathing room to enhance design clarity. So I think I've probably covered that in the earlier discussion, but that top form of the placement of the red flowers is very, very dense. And I know a lot of it is because I was keen to make sure that everything was in the water source, but I haven't allowed it room to breathe, and it does draw your eye there. And then when you look at the side, you think, well, there's all this space at the side. Why couldn't that have been filled with some other interesting things? If I'd had liriope or lamandra or something that was just a nice thin green leaf that cascaded down naturally and openly, and I could have placed a few more of the flowers at the sides and not restricting myself so much to the cascade down the front. Think about the waterfall doesn't always come down and go off to the sides as well. So I'd lost sight of the waterfall in putting this one together. Let's now look at some of the suggestions that DesignEye has for me for this particular design. The first one is refine the transition between structure and cascade to create a more seamless visual journey. So very much talked about that. So it's particularly from the side, we can see that it's it's inflorescence at the top, and it's the tatami section or the cascade section backed by the tatami. And that there needs to be better transitions and opening up that floral area, giving it a little bit more light. Having the cascading elements down on the sides a bit more would help that enormously. Reduce congestion in the central mass to improve clarity of focal area. So once again, these things are related. You change one thing and it has an effect on everything else in the design, and often it's a positive effect. One little thing can lift a design completely out of the ordinary. Number 3, strengthen depth balance so the design reads equally well from all angles. So again, this is related. It's all related to the one thing. It's just about using that space better for a full cascade rather than a front-facing cascade. Number 4, ensure all trailing elements feel intentional and connected rather than incidental. So that's having a little bit more thought about the placement and about the sizing of the placements, and making sure that they all cascade down to different levels, but that they're all part of the same story that's being told. Consider slightly extending or exaggerating the cascade to enhance drama and definition. And so this, I guess, is the overall improvement that it needs. It needs to be more of a complete cascade rather than the front-facing one, which it increasingly looks like it is when you keep looking at that side view. And so as my first attempt at this style of design, I did extraordinarily well, I think, but I can see what I need to do, and you know, it's some considerable time now, 7 years since I did it, so I have improved in my design skills as well, and I have done it a couple of times since then with success. But it is about going back and having a look and reminding yourself, because if I think about this design, I think, well, I got a second place, so that was pretty good, must have done a few things right. But when I look at it critically, when time has passed, and I know instinctively, looking at it, what I should do to improve it, that means that my journey is continuing and that I am continuing to learn. So there we have our review of Cascading Beauty for this week. As always, if you would like one of your designs looked at and you can get some feedback and some help on your journey and your education in floral art, you just visit the website and follow the instructions there. I'll be back next week, and next week's video will be from Melbourne. It will be whilst I should be just finished my competition design for the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, and so you will be able to go on that journey with me and see how it finished. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review.